welcome, everyone. Welcome back. I'm back from a much needed vacation. And it's kind of hard to produce this show um, while traveling. Although one day I hope to take it on the road. How about that? All right. So, welcome back, everyone, to Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And tonight, we're going to discuss my adopted state of North Carolina. Despite some of North Carolina's history of Jesse Helms and other extremely divisive Republicans of the past, North Carolina truly is a purple state. North Carolina voted twice for Barack Obama for president. We have a Democrat as governor, have had a few Democrats as governor since I've lived in the state. And I always, from my perspective, I always view North Carolina as that place of holding it down for, hold on one second. I don't have my banner up here. Hold on. I always look at North Carolina as holding it down for the South. Does that make sense? I look at North Carolina as the most progressive of the southern states. That's my personal view of it. And I liked and I was so proud when we were holding on to things, and then of course life changed and what have you. So what really changed, we had a whoever said that one person doesn't make a difference, they don't know what happened here in North Carolina. We literally had a representative who had duly served as an elected Democrat for 10 years, from 2007 to 2017. She took a break from running for office. And when she decided to run again, she was a Democrat. Let me say that. She was a Democrat. And when she decided to run again, her constituents assumed that she would take on her Democratic mantle again. And of course, that is how she ran. Tricia Cotham was a known entity. But on April 5th, 2023, she held a press conference and switched parties, disenfranchising thousands of those who voted for her, and gave the North Carolina GOP a supermajority. That supermajority is now overturning the vetoes that North Carolina Democrat Governor Roy Cooper made that helped in North Carolina hold the line that I talk about in the South. My guests are two very dynamic women who have been on the show before. They're going to give us the tea on what's going on in the North Carolina state legislature. And one of them now is a candidate for office. First up, we have Dr. Amber Baker. She is a Democratic representative for District 72 in Forsyth County in North Carolina. Most will recognize the city of Winston-Salem if I mention that, to understand what region she's from. Dr. Baker served more than a decade as principal of Kimberly Park School in Winston-Salem. She is a graduate of the HBCU, Winston-Salem State University, and earned her master's and PhD in educational leadership at the Ohio State University. She serves as vice chair of the Forsyth County Democratic Party's African American Caucus. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Baker.
Well, thank you for having me, Sister Pam. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And next we have political candidate Nicole Quick. Nicole is now running as a Democrat for District number 59 in Guilford County. Think Greensboro, North Carolina, to figure out what region that is. Nicole is a community activist, an organizer, wife, and mother. She serves as PAC treasurer and policy fellow for Carolina Forward. I love Carolina Forward. Previously, she served as chair of the Guilford County Democratic Party. Nicole ran a very race for the North Carolina House back in 2020. But we're here. We're going to push her to the finish line so that
Yay.
she can join Amber in the North Carolina House. All right, that's what we're going to do. And it doesn't matter for whatever state that you're in or whatever, because what happens to one of us happens to all of us, really and truly. And we need to be thinking globally that way, because the GOP certainly thinks that way. Okay, so welcome back, Nicole. Welcome
Thank
back.
you, Pam. Thank you for having me here again.
Yes. So listen, I am doing research for the show, and I tell you, you go away for a couple of weeks, and really, I keep up with the news all the time, but wasn't as intense because I was really trying to take a break. And I'm telling you, I thought, what in the world? What happened? It's like, what in the world happened? And so I understand that there were 6 vetoes that have been overturned in the North Carolina legislature, and all because one person, Miss Tricia Cotham, decided that she would disenfranchise those voters and become a Republican. So, Amber, I'm going to go with you first. And I want you, if you could, talk to us about what's happening with the school or education situation with voting in our state legislature. Where are we at with charter schools, with all this privatization they were talking about of schools? What's going on with that?
So they are continuing to dismantle public education as we know it, with the extension of the voucher program. Now they will be able to use state taxpayer dollars if your child goes to private school, and you can afford to send your child to private school. You can now give yourself a nice little cushiony tax break by using a voucher to send your child to private school. And the biggest issue with that is that there is no safeguards in place. Those schools are not required to be upheld to the same standard as traditional public educational systems and schools. They can discriminate. The legislation is written in such a way that it allows them to continue to use the gatekeeping mechanisms that allow them to discriminate against children. And in addition to the vouchers, we are continuing to see um, just all of we're moving fastly towards Florida, where we are restricting what students can learn in the classroom. We're putting legislation in place that now penalizes not only teachers, but potentially superintendents. They have drafted and presented on the floor and voted out of the House a bill that would allow parents to now go to the school board and require that a superintendent lose their job. So much of what you're seeing around the state is actually occurring here. Um, our legislators, our Republican legislators here, are just doing it more underground. And because we don't have a governor that is a co-conspirator with all of this bad legislation, we don't hear about it as much and as often as we do in some other states.
Nicole, running for office against a Republican that has been in office for at least 10 years now, John Hardister in Guilford County. Tell me what you think about what's going on and what your plan of attack when you get into office.
So, Pam, the reason I originally ran for office was because my son is on the autism spectrum. And when I sent him off to our neighborhood school, this was back in 2013, this Republican legislature had just come into power and they made massive cuts to the education budget, right? And we had teachers laid off across the county. The special ed teacher at our local school was let go. There wasn't anyone there to serve that need. And, it was terrible. And I was going into the school to advocate for him. And when I went to school with him, what I saw were buildings falling apart, mold in the ceiling, the air conditioners on the second floor not working, teachers having to leave the classrooms in the warm months to work outside with the students. Not enough teachers leaving to go to other states where they could get paid a decent wage, no support staff, so I saw how underfunded these schools were. And that is what drove me to run in 2020. Well, my son has graduated. He's a freshman, just finished his freshman year at Guilford College, is getting ready to start his sophomore year now. But thank you. But he made it through. But the situation with our schools is getting worse. You look at this voucher bill they've passed through. I know in Guilford County alone, we're going to lose a ridiculous amount of money is going to be redirected to the private schools in the form of the voucher program. And that's money we can't afford to lose. They're already underfunded. And I'm just, I'm blown away. I mean, kids went back to school this week here, and there aren't enough bus drivers. There aren't enough teachers. And this Republican legislature, they hold a supermajority, and they can't even get themselves together to pass a budget so these schools can plan for these kids. So I'm even more upset than I was before. And I do have a better chance to flip this seat now because the incumbent is John Hardister. He was, until just this past week, the House Majority Whip, and he is not running for re-election. He's going to be running statewide for Secretary of Labor. So it's an open seat. It's one of the most competitive seats in the state as the districts are currently drawn. So I feel really good about it. And I'm hoping I can get there and help Dr. Baker and her colleagues fight to fully fund that education budget.
Absolutely. And can I just piggyback on something that Nicole said? When I debated against this bill, when it hit the floor a couple of months ago against our favorite flipper, I don't mention her name. It's like Beetlejuice. I think if you mention it too many times, something even worse will happen. But one of the questions I asked her was how much money was left in the account. See, they're talking about expanding this program, but they have not fully spent all of the money that currently has been set aside. And what people don't know is that there are several $100,000 still sitting in this account that has not been expended under the current voucher program. So for them to now say that they want to expand it to give more parents access, the original parents that were targeted did not fully access that. So how are you going to expand a program that has not already created a demand for a need to be expanded? Right. And then what they didn't say is that over the course of the next 5 years, this is going to cost us potentially around $10 million.
Where's that money coming from?
And so we asked that question. That was another question that went unanswered. It was not answered where that money is coming from. But what I can tell you is if they use the same formula to identify what money goes to schools based on head count, and you're now saying that the parent can take their head count money and go to any school, it's going to pull away from your general education fund. And they do not want to say that out loud because they want to promise that this money will not hurt public education, but that in fact it'll make it better by making it more competitive. No. I don't know that logic because the math is not mathing.
It's not. And with the chocolate writer is saying in the chat, they want to totally privatize education and get rid of public schools and the Department of Education at the federal level. And we saw that when Betsy DeVos was head of education. She's a very wealthy woman out of my home state of Michigan. And I'm telling you, it's just, I feel like we are headed into an era of Jim Crow 2.0 because the big fight for equalization in Brown versus Board of Education in '54, and look how long it took for that to be implemented. Look how some of the southern states, it took forever for them to really do what was supposed to be done with that. And so when you take away the money and say, oh, you get a tax credit, you get a tax, that kind of thing. What about all of those kids like Nicole, your child on the AU spectrum? All the other kids who have special needs and disabilities, they will not get, I know for a fact that they do not, that the charter schools kind of take them and don't take them. They don't do the same thing. They don't have a lot of the same standards. And that's just
Right.
But they're supposed to. So,
supposed to, but
right.
they don't, Amber. So what do you
Well,
do with that?
full transparency. So I ran a charter school for 3 years in Minnesota. And so
Okay.
what I like to tell people is the reason I support charter schools and I don't support vouchers is because when charter schools are set up the way they were intended, charter
Mhm.
schools are held to the same standard as your traditional public schools.
Mhm.
The expectations is that they take every child that enters through their door. They must offer the same services to that child, regardless of need. And that it is, when it is done right, it is an equitable situation. So I wouldn't be able to discriminate against Nicole's son in a charter school. Now, with that being said, that is not how we've set up charter school law in the state of North Carolina. In addition, children who have special needs also receive additional federal money to make
Mhm.
sure that they're meeting the needs. But here's the problem. If we continue to defund the standard base of pay on the traditional funding side, then without an increase on the federal funding side, then those babies who have special needs will continue to suffer, not because they're not receiving the additional money that they should be getting from federal funds to care for their services, but because we continue to defund them on the traditional funding side. Does that make sense? Because when it
Yeah.
comes to babies with special needs, there's two pools of money that ensure that those children get what they need in terms of education. So here's how it all relates, right? We have not funded Leandro, so that is a problem. Um, the overturning of affirmative action at the federal level is a problem because that is all going to seep down, right? The defunding of public education at the state level all ties into that. And here's what most people don't understand is what they're trying to return to is even beyond Roe versus Wade. I'm sorry, Brown versus the Board of Education. But when public schools were set up as we know it, they were never designed to educate the masses. Initially, when public schools was designed by Thomas Jefferson, it was considered an elite privilege, and it was designed to educate white males only, not
Oh,
definitely not the slaves and women, because you got to keep in mind women were not considered citizens, and black folks was only considered three-fifths property.
right.
So it was never designed to educate anyone but white males. That's what they're trying to take us back to. That's why they want to whitewash the history, right?
Mm.
Because they want, and when they talk about making America great again, what women don't understand, regardless of color, that excludes you as well,
Yes. Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so when I'm talking about this, I try to make sure that I connect all the dots so that people can see that this is not just about poor black children or poor brown children. This is about in the othering, anybody who is not an elite white male.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Okay.
what this is really about.
And
Okay.
Pam, if I could interject,
Yes.
so as far as the voucher program, Caroline Ford actually had one of our associates look at private schools across the state this past week
Mm-hmm.
and how many actually admitted students with special needs. and it was ridiculous. There
I
is a
remember.
minute number
Mhm.
of private schools in the state that actually say they will admit students with special needs. So those vouchers aren't going to those kids.
Right.
And I will add to that as well, Nicole. So I taught in a private school for 2 years. Um, because I wanted to know at that time, this was many years ago, what was it that parents were paying for? At that time, the tuition was at around $12,000. And I wanted to know what was so unique about private schools that parents were paying $12,000 for here locally in Winston-Salem. And in those 2 years, what I found out is the teaching wasn't significantly greater than what I had experienced with my colleagues in public school. As a matter of fact, I would put any public school teacher up against a private school teacher because public school teachers have to do more with less. What they were paying for was exclusivity. I also said this on the floor.
Hmm.
There are certain children that those parents do not want their kids to go to school with.
Yeah.
One with special, certain kinds of special needs. Now, if
Right.
your baby has ADD, that's the first time that I learned about a full-time nurse being on staff and administering meds. I was not fully aware of this. It was very early on in my career, but
Hmm.
they don't want their kids to go to school with certain kinds of kids. So they're paying for exclusivity. So, and like I started at the top of the hour by saying, what this will do is it basically will give a tax break to the parents who can already afford to send their
Afforded. Exactly.
school. And they
Exactly.
probably have some type of educational savings plan set up. So it's the gift that will keep on giving to them because all they got to do is filter it through the school and then take the money that they save. They can pay off their student loans. They can put the money in an account for to draw interest to pay for their kids' college. So it is the gift that keeps on giving for those parents that can afford to send their kids to private school. For those parents who they like to paint the face that this will happen, that will it will help. They paint the face of our at-risk children, and shouldn't they have the right to choose where they want to go to school? Well, here's the problem: that voucher will not cover tuition at any private school. I don't know. I have not checked all the Catholic schools, but I would assume that most religious schools, though the tuition is somewhat cheaper, it still will not cover the total cost of tuition. So where are our parents who are already working two, sometimes three jobs just to piece together money to live? Where are they going to find the additional money to send their children to these schools that they say this voucher plan is going to assist?
It's bull crap. We have a comment: when the children are sent back to public schools, the money does follow. Is that true?
No,
Is
that
that
is
true?
not true. Here in Minnesota, it is true. The money truly follows the child. In North Carolina, that is not so. So they can take a child, get the money. That child can be returned back to their home school, but that money does not follow them back. As a matter of fact, that was one of the amendments that I offered that was voted down. And why would that be the case? If the child is not there, if the school is not servicing the child, why should the money stay there? But we know that this is a money making scheme for the people that can afford to make the money. So that is why it's a double whammy to public education. First of all, the funds don't come into the school, and the funds don't follow the child back to the school.
Mhm.
And Dr. Baker, didn't we discover also that some of these private schools that were getting voucher money didn't even exist?
Correct.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Yes.
So where was the money going?
So that we don't know because there are, so as much as they like to micromanage the operations of traditional public schools, there is no oversight on the schools that are receiving these vouchers. One of the things that I also proposed that they have, again, Minnesota was the first state to have charter schools, so they are so far advanced in terms of this. You have to have a sponsor in Minnesota who provides direct oversight to the school that they are sponsoring.
Then
You
why
have,
keep replicating what something has already worked? Or
well,
worked?
because here, that I do not think that the intention is to genuinely offer parents a solution that would allow their children to be successful in a setting that they had not previously been successful in. I do not believe that that is the intent of our charter school law. I do, me personally, and the data supports this view, is that this is a money making vehicle. If
Mhm,
you look at some of the charter schools here,
mhm,
I did not realize until my grandson came to live with me that some of these charter schools are like community colleges. And
mhm,
when you follow the money and you start to look at who's on their boards, I mean, these schools have huge campuses, 12, 15 buses, state of the art facilities, and they're charters. And I say charters,
mhm,
that's a facade. And here's the other thing, I don't have proof for this, I just am kind of watching. What they're building is a network of schools of
mhm,
exclusivity, right,
mhm, mhm.
on taxpayer dollars.
I know, on taxpayer dollars. Nicole, help us out here.
And it's been said they are trying to privatize the school system, and it will only be available to those who are the elite. So if we follow through on the current voucher program and the charter schools, the way they're set up in North Carolina, then yes, you're going to end up with people in our public schools who are under resourced, more so than even now, and aren't getting a sound basic education, which Leandro demands. And that these are the kids who can't afford to even take a voucher to go to a private school, because even with the voucher, it's still too expensive, because there are no buses going to a lot of these private schools, and the parents can't drive their kids there and drop them off, because there aren't free and reduced lunches at these places, a lot of them. So the kids who are going to be left in public schools are going to be the low income students that they don't want in their elite schools. It's really sad.
And
Right.
and then we're back to separate and yet still
And
unequal.
Right,
unequal.
exactly.
So listen, we've spent, I tell you, the education pieces forever, forever and ever. Nicole, coming to you, our future North Carolina House Republican in District 59.
Not Republican. No, no.
Democrat all the way. Okay.
Mhm.
So explain to us what the Parents' Bill of Rights, because I kept getting confused with it.
Ooh. So a couple of the major things that I understand that came out of this is number one, the school has to notify the parents if the child starts using a different gender identity or a different name from their birth name. And, the reason that this is a problem, Pam, is because a lot of kids may not be in a situation where they can come out to their parents. That might actually be a dangerous situation at home for them. But this is basically forcing them out, because the school is required to tell the parents if they suspect this, right? So it puts these kids, who are already some of our most vulnerable students, at increased danger. So that's one thing. Another part of this is there can't be any instruction on gender identity, sexuality, any of that. So,
So we have human sexuality courses. It's in biology. In your biology class, you learn about the birds and the bees and all of that stuff. So, in other words, you won't learn about that too. You won't learn any of it. Maybe I don't.
well,
What is?
they are specifically targeting LGBTQ. Okay, so if a child happens to have two moms, two dads, then they're going to feel very isolated because that's not going to be talked about or considered normal. It's going to be somehow taboo to discuss that in the schools.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So that's one of the that was the parents' bill of rights that was vetoed.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay. And so, but yet, and now this is with strength. Okay, so they veto the parents' rights for gender affirming care for their minor children. Now that is a minuscule amount of people, right?
Right.
But it just is. My thing is, I don't, that's none of my business.
Mhm.
So, and it's not something that you go and broadcast or whatever. I wouldn't think,
Well,
right?
here's the irony to that is that in one veto overturn is the parent bill of rights, that the parents have the right to be informed. The parents have a right to participate in their child's public educational process. And for the record, many of the rights that are in the bill of rights in terms of what the educators and schools are expected to do are the things that they are already expected and required to do in terms of reporting and notifying parents of child's academic process, and the state report card is already law. So for them to put it in there as if the parents don't have that right is misleading. But here's the hypocrisy in it all is that in the Parents' Bill of Rights, they want to talk about the parents' right to make a decision and to be participatory in their child's educational process. And in the same group of bills that we voted on and were not able to uphold was the gender affirming care. And so, in one breath, you're saying the parents should be able to make these decisions. They know what's best for their kids. And then
Right,
in the same breath, you're saying the parents don't know what's best for their kids when it comes to making the healthcare decisions regarding the gender affirming care. So that's where the hypocrisy in all of this lies, is that either the parent has the right to make
hmm,
the decisions about what's best for their children, which they do, or they don't.
right,
And so, so that's the hypocrisy in all of it. And when pushed
mhm,
to have the discussion on the floor and the debate on the floor, the speaking points are the generated speaking points. So you could take our floor debates and drop them into any other state that is having these same discussions and debates and fights around gender affirming care, around critical race theory, which we know is not a thing in public school,
right,
about the sanitizing of history, particularly Black history, and you can put that in any state, and you can close your eyes and you don't know what state you're in,
right.
because they literally are taking, as you said earlier, they take these stock. Um, Legislation pieces, and then
Hmm,
they run them through their state bill drafting to tweak them so that they are aligned with the state requirements. But that
hmm,
is why you see so many of these bills that are similar in nature occurring all around the nation.
hmm.
And you know what gets me, Pam? You mentioned that this affects the gender affirming care affects such a small number of people. Well, look at this other bill that they overrode the veto on, the trans athlete bill. You know how many students that affects in North Carolina?
I have no idea.
One little poor student they're persecuting with that bill who was trying to play on a sports team. One, a whole bill. Isn't that
And I
crazy?
and I would also say that it's also smoke and mirrors, right? So while we're talking about the veto bills, which we should be, those are important. What we're not talking about is the massive voter restriction and voter suppression bill that was passed that same day. We're not talking about that, right? So we
Hmm,
have to be careful not to allow them to control the narrative. While being
right.
respectful of the bills that were vetoed, we
Hmm,
also must keep in front of people the fact that we're not talking about all of these regulations that they are now requiring to be implemented without any funding, even though 40 bills were proposed from our side to try to make a horrible bill less horrible. And the only one that they allowed to pass was to be able to feed people.
Mhm.
And so where did we first hear that? In Georgia, right? Georgia made it a crime to be able to give water and food to people who were standing in line or working at the polls. So,
It's just so insanely cruel and disgusting
right.
that I don't know. I get so frustrated with
You gotta
all.
ask yourself what is going on if the elected officials don't want more people to vote. They actually are trying to prevent people from voting. Then they're not really representing the people, are they?
Correct.
Oh, absolutely.
Or putting into place more allowances for people to potentially harass
Right.
the voters in the form of poll watchers, allowing people's names to be published who may, for one reason or another, not be eligible to participate in the jury pool, but there's a direct correlation to citizenship and your ability to vote and your ability to serve. So, again, we have to, I remember when they first put the 6-week abortion ban in. And one of the things that I've continued to say is that they did all of that so very early because they know that people's attention spans are short, and
Mhm.
that by the time we get ready to actually file and run, people will have forgotten about that. So I think that it is critical for us to rehearse everything that they've done and not just stay stuck in kind of this cylindrical cycle of just talking about the immediate or recent bad behavior that they have
It's
exhibited
so,
in forms of
but
bills.
that's the problem. Is so much bad behavior.
It
It's
is.
overwhelming. I was just sitting and I was listening to the news, and then it was like, and another thing,
Yeah.
and another thing.
But that's what that but all of that, Pam, is by design. It is designed to desensitize you, to wear you out, but we cannot give up the fight. We cannot. And here's the thing. The LGBTQ bills, while they are critical, as Pam just said, it affects such a small population of people. With North Carolina being a purple state, we have to be careful not to over conflate that issue with the issues that the broader people in North Carolina are concerned about. And so that's why we have to do both and both. We have to talk about the LGBTQ issues, but we also have to continue to talk about the 6 weeks abortion ban, which Carolina Forward did a great piece on, letting the data that supported overwhelmingly
Right.
North Carolina's support our current legislation. We have to continue to remind people about the dismantling of public education. We have to keep doing all of those things because everybody is going, and definitely about what's going on with voter rights, because here's the other piece. If your signature changes, they can throw
Right.
your ballot out. So we
Mhm.
have to talk about the broad umbrella that will
Mhm.
affect an overwhelming majority of our North Carolinians. And then I like to call them the spokes of the umbrella that holds the umbrella up. Those issues that may not affect as many people, but is critical because we represent all of the voters in the state of North Carolina, regardless
Right.
of how
Right.
narrowly defined their issue is.
Let's talk about one of those issues. While
Yeah,
they are busy overriding these votes, they have not passed a budget. And what is the one thing tied to that budget that affects so
Medicaid
many North Carolinians?
Medicaid expansion for sure.
Exactly. So there are people across the state delaying health care while
Correct.
we sit here and wait for a budget to be passed because they made Medicaid expansion dependent upon that budget, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
and
And they
I
they
was
were intentional
upset.
about doing the big signing at the governor's mansion and all these celebratory issues, and everybody wanted all the men wanted to walk around and thump their chests, and we're so proud. This is 10 years in the making. And I
Mhm.
was saying to people, but it means nothing.
Right.
because the other shoe has not dropped.
Right.
And the other thing that we have to mention to people, because I'm starting to take myself off of social media because people just don't understand, but the Democrats have nothing to do with why the budget has not been passed.
Right.
We are not upholding anything. We are not fighting for anything. We are not leveraging our votes for anything. We have no power. Our governor, he can veto, but they already know they have the
They got it.
vote.
Because this
So,
woman, I want
right.
you guys to
No,
not
no,
forget.
no, hold on. Because here's what you have to say to people. It is the Republicans in the Senate and the Republicans in the House. It is the Republicans fighting against Republicans.
Right.
And people need to understand that, because they don't. And the reason why I know they don't understand that is because of some of the comments that are made to me on social media. And I'm saying it is not the socialist agenda of the Democrats that's upholding the budget, right? It's not that. These are Republicans
Right.
fighting against Republicans. Now go ahead and mention Beetlejuice.
They have a supermajority and they still can't govern. They can't pass any legislation. Yeah.
And making it harder for people to be able to vote and to continue to dismantle public education. All of that is interreacted.
And Pam, I want to mention that since we were talking about voting rights. I think since the last time I was with you, the Harper v. Moore or Moore v. Harper case was decided at the Supreme Court. I was a plaintiff on that case and had been for several years. And that was after 5 years, we finally have ended that case, and we can expect more gerrymandering ahead throughout North Carolina as a result.
Oh my God. Oh God. I'm just so exhausted with all of that. That gerrymandering. Deb Carter says, please continue to stay active on social media. It's like you know what? I will retweet or repost or whatever it is that you say that it is a What are they fighting amongst each other about? They got
casinos. They're fighting over casinos.
Oh God. You know what?
It's casinos. It's $50 million. Burger wants $50 million for some kind of quarter. I'm not really sure. It's the first time that I've heard anything about it. He's fighting for expansion of casinos, and what they're trying to do, they want to take the tax base for corporations to zero, and what they're trying to do is to put other like the expansion of casinos with the sports betting bill. What they're trying to do is to justify taking the corporate base to zero, because they know that is going to take billions, hundreds of millions of dollars away from our ability to use that money, that tax revenue, to help fund schools and roads and all of the things. And so that's what they're fighting over.
Listen, and as people are listening, not everybody in the chat is from North Carolina. So it does not matter where you live. You're hearing from people that are in city, in state government and government adjacent, and they are telling you what's happening in this state. And if you notice, it's happening. It's the same. All the GOP has done is do a cut and paste. Cut and paste. Let's see what we can get to happen here and there. And North Carolina, like I said, we held the line for so long, and we have just got to go back and clean it up. I just cannot believe that we're going to keep things like this. We can't.
And I will be remiss if I didn't say, for those that are registered to vote, check your registration often, because the next wave that we can look forward to, and Nicole kind of alluded to that, is they will be redrawing the maps. They will be expunging voter roll.
Voter purge, yeah.
Yes, purge. Thank you. Purging voter rolls. They were successful in implementing a voter ID requirement to vote. So please, if you don't have, in North Carolina, If
Mm-hmm.
you don't have a government issued ID,
Mm-hmm.
call your board of elections, because I
Right.
know here in Winston-Salem, our board of elections, after fighting with them the last go round, to make sure that the people just don't have to go to the board of elections to get an ID that will suffice. They are actually doing voter ID um, kind of at different locations. So in North Carolina, check with your board of because they're free, and we know that for some people, they don't have the money to pay for a state government ID. The other suggestion that I would make is for churches and community organizations
Mm-hmm.
to fund and take people to go get their state IDs so that they will have a legitimate ID, and to ensure that you have some piece of mail that has your address on it, because that's the other piece that we can look forward to being implemented.
And Pam, you should also make folks aware that they're also trying to decrease or even eliminate early voting.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh God. And
So
I
they're
love
talking about
voting.
that right now.
That
The
was that
Republican I'm running to replace is trying to.
Well, that was actually in the Senate bill. I'm not good with the numbers. 747, I think it is, that bill that just got passed on the floor. That's what I'm saying. What their MO is they take something really controversial,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And they put that out there because they know that people are going to be focused on that. But no one is talking about Senate Bill 747, and that has a lot of that legislation in there. And that was a conference report.
Mm, mm, mm,
So, yeah, that
mm.
part.
Wow. Here's a comment from someone that lives in the state of Michigan. I am concerned about children's attendance according to the Detroit Free Press report on education as being a national concern. Will encourage more private schools. Pay attention, people. Yeah.
I don't, you know, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. But
Hmm.
what I will say, the bulk of my career, almost 30 years in public education now, and the bulk of it being spent in highly impacted schools. And by that, I don't just say Title I schools, because all Title I schools are not equal, but highly impacted in the sense that our families are coming from marginalized communities. They usually are in high poverty areas, food insecurity, food deserts, underemployed family members. And there are so many societal contributors to why our families and our children and our babies in particular are plagued with attendance issues. And oftentimes, what I tell people is that if we can stabilize the home life, what we will begin to see is better schools. And by stabilizing the home life, I mean providing them with quality, affordable housing that they can afford based on their income, giving them a decent wage. And here in Winston-Salem,
Absolutely.
when we moved here, parents who didn't even have high school diplomas were making upper middle class revenues from their job. Their income was, six figures. And if you had two families that worked at RJR or worked at Haynes, they were making almost $200,000 with high school diplomas. They owned their own homes. The schools and the
Detroit.
communities were very stabilized. Same thing in Detroit, right? The
Uh,
people who worked at the auto industries,
right.
right? So what we've done is, yes, we reinvented ourselves from being a tobacco city, right? But what we've done is we've created jobs that require specialized training, education. And so the people on the lower tier who do not have job training or workforce development or advanced degrees have been left kind of in the wind. So what you see is, like you see around the nation, increase in crime, increase in poverty, increase in violence, low performing schools. So it's all interrelated. It all is. And so, what I would say to anyone listening to this, regardless of what state you're in, you have to ensure that your mayors, your city council, your county commissioners, as they're bringing new industry, particularly in Detroit, because I watch that a lot, that they are bringing in jobs that will be accessible to the masses. And if they're not accessible to the masses, what do you have in place that will allow people to be able to access this? Do you have transportation that will allow them to go to those jobs if they're not in city proper? Again, so we have to see that all of that's interrelated. That once we stabilize communities, we will see a stabilized schools. And so everybody can't afford to start a private school. Private schools are not cheap to start. Everybody can't afford to send private schools, but we can all ensure that our communities that we live in, and I tell people I live in a hot zone in Winston. I don't live in one of the affluent neighborhoods that I represent. I live, work, and play in the same community where we are being plagued by gun violence, murders. My families are here, and I chose to be here. I chose to buy my house here. The community didn't change around me. I moved into the community in hopes of changing the community.
Nicole, I want to get you to answer this question. If there's been any change to absentee voting in North Carolina?
Not yet, but watch for it, because it will probably be coming. They are trying to do something about that because they know that their people vote on election day. People who are working hourly jobs, right, and can't get away from work, they're the folks who have to rearrange their schedule and try to get to early voting. And those are the working class people who are not voting Republican. So they know all these things are doing are to benefit them and keep them in power, whether it's gerrymandering the districts or requiring IDs. Who does that affect? That affects low-income people and college kids. Who are those folks voting for? Probably not Republicans. They know this when they put these laws into effect. They know precisely who they're targeting and that they're keeping them from voting, and they're doing it so they can hang on to power.
So, and in that, again, if you get a chance to go, I think it's 747. What they're doing is they're chipping away at it. So what they've also done is they went from one witness to now two witnesses if you're voting absentee. Again, they put the handwriting requirement in place. And so those are chipping away at that. They have changed when the absentee ballots have to be received into the Board of Elections. In the past, as long as it was postmarked before election day, it had 3 days to come into the Board of Elections to count. They in that Senate bill, they are changing that now, saying that if the absentee ballot does not arrive by election day, that the ballot will be spoiled and be turned out. That does not include people who are in the military, but it does affect our students who sometimes vote absentee, and it does affect our elderly because again, you have to have two witnesses, and if there's one error on your ballot, they can spoil it. So they have to chip away.
No, sounds the same stuff. Same stuff. Nicole, I gotta ask you. You are running for office. Tell us what your platform is.
So, as I mentioned earlier, the reason I decided to run was education. That has not gotten better since I ran in 2020. It's gotten worse. That is still important to me because I believe that our communities grow, our economy grows based upon a healthy, educated workforce. So I think affordable health care, quality education are important for driving the state forward. And I am, without a doubt, running to reinstate women's reproductive rights because we don't need legislators making decisions about deeply personal matters that should be decided with advice from our doctors and our families. So those are my top 3 things. There is a whole laundry list of other things. I'm passionate, like Dr. Baker, about voter protection. I believe that every person, every citizen should have the right and opportunity to vote. We should make it easier for them to be able to vote. We shouldn't be putting up barriers to prevent people from voting. And I don't believe that legislators should be picking their own districts. I think we need an independent redistricting commission. And in this case, in the past, not recently in North Carolina, but in the past, Democrats have been guilty of this too, where they draw the districts to keep them in power. We need to take that out of the hands of legislators and put it in the hands of an independent commission so that lawmakers aren't drawing their districts to keep themselves in office and they're held accountable by the voters.
I have to confess that I am, the numbers are just because I live in Durham and my district has changed, and I'm just like, I thought I was in 2. And then, and you know, and I vote all the time. So it's I can only imagine somebody who's not been a voter or voting for the first time, and then things keep changing because nobody likes stuff to keep changing. We like to know where we're going, to do, what we're doing, filling out our ballots and getting those things done. How can Dr. Baker, you're going to be running for reelection too in 2024. So both of you will be on the ballots, right?
Yeah, I will be. In terms of what my district will look like, I'm not sure. They have repeatedly told me not to get comfortable in my seat. I know that they have been tweaking my district to try to make it more competitive. Oftentimes, when I'm seeking endorsements and trying to fundraise, people are like, "Oh, you're good. You're in a safe district." Well, one, there's no such thing as a safe district.
Right.
And 2, if you understand the dynamics of the people who are in my district is actually about a third, and a third. Third Republican, third Independents, and third Democrats. And so I am constantly not only catering to our Democratic registered voters, but I'm also working really hard to win the votes of the independents. And if I don't do that, then this seat could be lost because independents are independent for a reason. They want to be able to have the flexibility to vote Democratic or Republican. So we have to understand that when we have a strong candidate like Nicole, that we have to be able to work together and support each other.
Absolutely.
And Nicole is running in Guilford County, guys, in Guilford County. So those of you who know someone, or if you're in Greensboro area, you see Nicole's signs, you know who she is, Nicole Quick, for District 59. And I know that Dr. Baker's signs are vote Amber Baker or whatever. You're in District 72. Your voice is I don't know what happened to her voice. Anyways, can one of you, Dr. Baker, is your mute button is on. I can't unmute you because you did it. So you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was like, how did that happen? Yes, I am in right now. I am in District 72.
Right. So someone wants to know, can you explain how the voter laws affect people whose signature has changed? Deb said that her signature has changed due to illness. So what about that?
So what I would suggest that you do is call your Board of Elections, because again, that is legislation that's coming down the pipe, and ask them, can you submit a new voter registration form so that your most current signature is what is on file, and make sure that all of your ID aligns with your new signature. That is the best thing that I can suggest to you, because my mother has had a stroke recently, Her signature is changing. And so there's a number of reasons that people's signature may change. And so that's what I would suggest to you is contact your board of elections, let them know that you have had a significant signature change as a result of illness and that you would like to put your new signature on file.
Okay. All right. And she says thank you. Okay. Fantastic. Nicole, any parting words since you are our candidate and we want you in, you guys, we have to think collectively about all the candidates that we bring on this show because I'm not bringing on anybody that I don't want to win.
Yes.
That's just,
Thank you, Pam. My official kickoff is this Wednesday in downtown Greensboro. So if you're in this area, reach out to me. I'd love to have you drop by.
Send me
okay.
your information to Nicole and I'll try to make it as well. Like I said, we are in this together.
Thank
Right.
you.
I
will.
would say, even for those of you who are watching, this is my shameless plug, not only for me but for Nicole, and Pam can vouch for us.
Yeah.
Every dollar counts.
Yes.
It's not always the big donors that I will say that will drive. It's not the big donors for me that drives my campaign. It's those people who give $5 or $10 or $20, and know this, that what $20 can do is that it can help me feed people who are making phone calls and doing the phone banks. $50 helps pay a down payment on our flyers, or it helps to give out gas cards to people who are driving around. So don't think any amount is too small, and you can give to a candidate no matter where they're running. Nicole's district is a little more competitive than mine, so every dollar is going to help. And I'm going to say this because she has been in the fight for a long time without any expectation of serving in office. Even when she didn't win, it would have been easy for her to say, oh, I didn't win, I'm just going to go take care of my family. But she has been in the fight for a long time. And so if there's anything that you can do to help support her, please do. For those of you who are in North Carolina, there is no reason for you not to give to her campaign or to see if you can volunteer. You don't have to live in Guilford to help her. You can get a list of voters in her district and make phone calls on her behalf, and you can do that from anywhere. Or a letter writing campaign to reach out to our voters who have not participated in voting for the last couple of election cycles. So, as Pam has said, we are in this thing together, and it is winnable. It is winnable, but we have got to flip seats so that we are not dependent upon one person. And know that people of color are under attack. Six of the people who did not win their seats last year, who did not win their election, were African Americans.
Really?
Yeah, it was 6.
And meanwhile, we put Trisha Coffin in there, and she stabbed us in the back. I showed you guys her picture.
I don't know why you keep mentioning her name.
I don't want you guys to forget the irony of it is that one person that she shifted the whole paradigm in the state of North Carolina.
That's correct.
One person.
Yes.
Which means every vote counts. You cannot give up on your voting rights. You must vote.
And vote all the way down the ballot, because
that's right.
Because 400 votes shifted the power on our Supreme Court. When Sherry Beasley lost her seat as Chief Justice in the Supreme Court, 2 cycles ago, she lost by 400 votes, and her losing that seat is what shifted the entire shift of power at the Supreme Court. So you may not think that your vote counts. It don't matter at this point what you think. We're here to tell you that your vote does count. And for those of you who are right,
because that Gremlin lady, that one woman,
yes,
she shifted things in North Carolina.
Correct. And if you're not satisfied with the people that are currently in office, then voting them out, getting the correct, getting being courageous enough to run is how you change things. And I absolutely agree with Pam. I think an independent body to draw our maps is what we need, because that will make the process more competitive once again, because it does not matter who's in power in terms of how the maps get drawn. And so everybody will have to go back to fighting and earning their right to return to their seats of power.
I've got one critical question. I was looking at John Hardister's committees and stuff that he belongs to, and he's the chair of this, and he's on that board of electors, the board of commissioners for the governor's board of who gets on that and all that kind of stuff. And I was noticing, do you get those higher up positions based on your longevity in the house, or is it, I mean, how do you get those coveted positions? How does that
That's a,
work?
you get them based on who's in power. That's the
Oh.
long and short of it. Some of the more powerful committees, like senior chairs of appropriations and finance,
Mm-hmm.
are probably based on seniority, but sometimes it's based on expertise. So I
Okay.
like to tell people in Winston, what they don't understand here is the third most powerful person in Raleigh is Donnie Lambert,
Who
who is out of
heard that
he's he's the senior appropriations chair. He is out of Winston. He's been down there 10 years. His background is in healthcare, so he was quite excited to see Medicaid expanded. But people don't understand that, but appropriations more than finance, because appropriations decides what gets into the budget. That's why
person?
he's the third most powerful person down there, behind the speaker, and then the rules chair, and then appropriations, and then the finance chair.
And see, these are civic lessons that we all need to know and understand, because I think that so much of the process and understanding that you must vote
Yeah.
locally to really make things happen for us individuals, it stems from our lack of understanding of how the whole thing works.
Well,
You
and
know?
also the closer the elections are to you personally, the more powerful those elections are. So when you don't participate in your state elections, which is your city council, your county commissioners, your school boards, those
Mhm,
really affect your day to day. Then
mhm,
when you get, to the and your judges and your district attorney races and your sheriff's races, all of
mhm.
those affect your day-to-day living. Then when you go to the state, we're a little further removed, but still impactful, because we can make the decisions about what money gets funneled into our city and county governments to provide services for our people. But most people tend to want to focus on DC and our federal elections, and those are important, but they're so far removed from the day to day. And those are, I like to say, global issues. And sometimes what they are, the decision makings that they make there, affect us, but not in the same way as our state legislator and our local elections and municipalities. And I will also tell
Mhm,
you this too, that the ruling body is who decides what committees you get put on. So last year I was on 4 committees. This year I'm on
mhm,
7. That sounds really important, but the truth of
mhm,
the matter, out of those 7 committees, uh,
mhm,
appropriations will meet. Appropriations transportation has not met. Our elections committee, which I'm glad I got put on, but I've not been able to affect any change. And then,
mhm,
believe it or not, the governor's commission, which Hardister is on as well,
mhm,
because people who are on these committees, particularly for the UNC committees and some of the other cabinet positions, they have these governing committees. Committee assignments on these organizations are also important, and it affects people's day to day. But many of those committees don't meet at all. They
mhm.
don't meet one time. And so it's interesting that the budget had lots of money in there for transportation, but we never met one time as a committee to talk
We
about
need to get our roads straight because our roads in North Carolina are horrible since the pandemic. I'll just say that. Listen, we're over time. I want to thank you, ladies, so much for coming on the show. I think that we've learned a lot, a lot, a lot. If you want to, Nicole, shout out what your website is. I'm gonna put it in the chat. What is it?
It's quick4nc.com. It goes live tomorrow.
quick4nc.com.
Yep, that's correct. And I want to thank you, and I want to thank Dr. Baker for the shout out and the support tonight. I appreciate that so much. It's not easy to run, so it means a lot to get that support.
But no, you're not in this alone. And I think sometimes as women, we forget that there's strength in numbers. And that's why I said, if I have to come to Guilford to give you a shout out, I will. Or when I'm having something here in Winston, I'll make sure that you're here. You too, Pam, since sometimes you're in NC, most of the times you're traveling the world.
No, I don't travel. I'm in NC. I just went away for a couple of weeks. I went back home. I went to Birmingham for a journalism conference.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But I definitely, I'm gonna have to come down to the Piedmont.
Come on down. Come on down.
Yes.
Come on down.
Dr. Baker, what's your website?
Thank you. It's vote, the number 4, amberbaker.com.
Okay. All right. I'm putting them in the chat. All right. So, ladies, thank you. Nicole, listen, you guys can always come back. We're going to have to really do a lot of stuff for to gear up for 2024. If we're already ready, we don't have to get ready, right? We're talking about it and being about it, and we're going to make it happen. Nicole, you've got this. This is your time.
Thank you, Pam.
It's your time. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.